Yo, I'm viral. Today I wanted to do something that I haven't done on my channel before. I wanted to talk about D&D and tabletop RPGs in general. Who knows, I might even make a series out of it. But today I just wanted to share a story that happened to a friend of mine, and I wanted to give my personal opinion on the matter. But seeing as this is the first video of its kind on the channel, I wanted to give my own personal history around tabletop RPGs just so, people can see where I'm coming from, or if anyone's curious, they can know. I've been playing D&D and other tabletop games for, how long has it been? It has to have been around almost a decade now, actually. Yeah, almost a decade now. I have a lot of experience. I've run a few games before. I've been a player in what feels like dozens of other games. Okay, well, not dozens, maybe like a dozen plus a handful, but I've been in a lot of games is what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that makes me like an expert on the matter. I'm not saying that, my word is law. I'm not saying anything to that nature. I'm just saying that I'm really passionate about the hobby. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So I've wanted to talk about it in a video for a while now. So you know what? I'm just gonna do it. Here we go. Okay, so here's the story. I have a friend who recently joined a different D&D group. He spoke with them, he ended up making a character and a backstory, worked with the DM in order to make sure that everything fit, the usual standard fare for joining an ongoing campaign, because he was joining a group who was in the middle of a game already. So with his character created, his backstory made, everything else is done, he showed up to the session ready to play. Unfortunately though, the entire session went by and he's just sat there and watched the DM and the other players play. The reason for that is because the DM was waiting for the perfect moment to introduce his character. Now, this continued. It wasn't just that session. It happened for the next 2 sessions. So my friend ended up sitting out for about 3 sessions watching the other players play while not being able to play himself before he was finally introduced. Now, the thing that makes this worse is that group only plays bi-weekly, every other week. So that means that in IRL time, a month and a half went by before he was finally allowed to join. He had to spend that much time watching the other players play, just sitting there on the sidelines, character ready to go, backstory made, concept all done, completely ready to go, but he couldn't play. Now, what am I getting at, you might be wondering? I'm going to share my personal opinion. My personal opinion is that if you have a player joining an ongoing campaign, you should introduce them ASAP. Now, I know things can be different depending on the group you're playing with. Some groups are okay with players sitting out and waiting. Other groups would want to try and get players into the action as soon as possible. And the thing is, I totally understand if the DM and the players are working together to make like a cohesive story, like a narrative that makes sense. But the number one thing that I think that everyone should remember, both DM and players, is that fun takes priority first and foremost. To me personally, if I was a player who had to sit out multiple sessions and watch everyone play, that's not very fun. Sure, the DM and the other players could be entertaining, but if I just wanted to watch all of the others play, then I wouldn't have made a character myself. I just would have asked if I can sit in on their game and just watch. And now I know it also depends on if your games are public or not, because it is totally possible that if you are recording your games or if you're live streaming them, sometimes decisions that'll make the narrative better or more interesting could prioritize over some other decisions, like trying to introduce a character at the perfect moment. However, if you're just playing a private game with your friends, I personally believe that you should get any players that are joining an ongoing game into the session as soon as possible, even if it may not make the most sense. The DM can always find a way to justify the player just randomly showing up, unless it's probably one of those really rare occasions where it's like, oh well, the party is like on like an island or something and it's supposed to be uninhabited. But even then, that doesn't mean there can't be an exception. It's like, oh, we thought the island was uninhabited, why is this person here? And then hey, you just created like a new mystery or something. Now, if it was me personally, if I was my friend in that situation, by the end of the first session, I would have tried to get in a meeting with the DM. I would say, hey, what happens? Like, I showed up ready to play, my character's done, my backstory's done, why didn't you introduce me during the session? It's just important to keep in mind how much fun that all of the other players could be having, because not every player would be willing to speak up for themselves if they're not having fun. There's a lot of people out there who are scared of conflict or opposition, you know, they don't want to rock the boat, especially if they're new to a group, especially if you're new to a group who you're not 100% close friends with yet. Like, say if you're just joining a random group online, like on Roll20 or some other forum or something where you don't really know all of the other players in the DM that well. The only reason you're playing together is because you met on the internet and decided to do it. So I can understand if it's a little harder to speak up then, because like I don't know these people. But even still, personally speaking here, I always think that you should introduce new players into your game ASAP. If we wanted to specify, I would personally say that if you introduce a new player, it should be within the first 50% of your session's runtime. So say for example, if you have 3-hour sessions, like me personally, whenever I run games, I try to keep it around 3 sessions or so. That player should be introduced by the hour 30 mark max, not a second over. And even then, that's a little generous. It wouldn't surprise me if some people say, what? No, that's still too long. It should be like within like the first 30 minutes, which of course, once again, varies by table. You know, talk to your DM, tell them your expectations. Say, hey DM, I'd really like it if I got to play sooner rather than later. Or if you are okay with waiting, say, hey DM, I'm totally cool and I'm totally fine with me waiting as long as possible for it to be the best part in the story, for me to show up out of nowhere. You know, like the party is fighting a boss or something, and then suddenly you show up out of the blue as reinforcements, and then, you know, you guys take down the boss together, and then that could be an interesting first impression that your character leaves on the other characters. Just talk to your group. Just talk to your group pretty much. All right, but now let me give an example of a game that I was running. A couple years ago, I was running a game that had 5 players in it and a 6-player join. We're all a group of friends, all a group of close friends. But I was sure to introduce them within 30 minutes or so. You see, the party was traveling through a dungeon that was occupied by goblins in this massive cave network. I could have introduced this new player's character later, but I decided to do it earlier because I noticed that around half an hour had gone by and the party was moving through the cave network pretty slowly because it was heavily guarded and there were a lot of enemies. So I decided to put these cages that were scattered around certain rooms of the cave to show where the goblins had captured prisoners. And inside one of those cages, I decided to put the player's character who was joining. So not only were they able to meet one of the players faster, and the player was able to join the game faster, then the new player decided that, hey, you know what? I hate the goblins for this. They captured me. They imprisoned me. Let me help you fight through this dungeon and get some revenge. So it all worked out. The player joined faster. They got to stomp some goblins together, befriended some too. It was a fun time. So that's pretty much it. That's all I really have to say on the topic. It's not a very deep or complicated one. Just in my personal opinion, introduce new players as soon as possible, even if you have to come up with an excuse or some sort of extra reason on why that player is currently near where the party is to join them. I mean, it could even be something as simple as, oh, the party is, it takes 3 sessions. Like, this is a travel based campaign where traveling is the whole point, so you don't just skip over the travel. But you know, the party's traveling through dangerous wilderness and it takes 3 days to get from one city to another. So you could say that, oh, well, they won't meet the new party member until they reach the next city. Or you can introduce them earlier and the party shows up and sees the new player currently being attacked by some other creature. So that way the party gets to jump in and help the new player. They all get to fight that creature together and they can use that as a bonding experience. Say, hey, remember how we met, how you were being attacked by that owl bear or that dire bear, or that dire bear working together with an owl bear? What was up with that? But you know, it could be fun. Just come up with a reason. You can always narratively justify it later. Don't worry about it. Personal opinion. Okay, that's all. That's the actual video this time. I've covered pretty much everything I need to say. Nothing else comes to mind. Just personal opinion. Introduce people ASAP. If you've had a similar experience to this, or if you had any details or past experiences that you want to share, please feel free to let me know. And if you like these kinds of videos, also let me know. I have a lot to say about a lot of different topics on D&D and tabletop in general, about rules, about mechanics, definitely about ways to roleplay. I have tons and tons and tons of stuff to say. So if you're interested in seeing more, feel free to let me know as well. All right, that's all. Take care.